My biggest year as a salesperson that I made commission was about a little bit over 2.9 million straight commission. My background in college was behavioral science and like social dynamics, how human beings make decisions. If you want to be like top 1% salesperson, you have to view that selling is collaborative. It's like you working with the prospect to help them find and solve problems that maybe they didn't know they had. So if the prospect have problems and your solution solves those, then what's the missing link? Why are they not buying from you? Well, the missing link is you.
All selling is change. That's it.
There is a direction you're taking somebody. Is there a script they're working off of?
There's 5 tonalities that you really have to master. You have to master the, curious tone. Like then there's the confused tone, like a playful tone, a challenging tone, concerned tone. I might lean in and be like, what's really holding you back? So it's like how you shift your tone, like that really cause a prospect to actually engage with you. Do I believe in scripts? Yes. Do I believe in sounding scripted?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm excited to be interviewing one of my friends, Jeremy Miner, and I'm excited because I feel like in the last 100 years, there's a lot of people who have taught sales, but the most part, it's just kind of been the same thing. And you started popping up in my newsfeed probably 2 years ago, started seeing it, and at first I was like, oh no, someone teaching sales, like what's going to be new from here? And then as I started digging into your stuff and watching your training and going into it, I was like, oh, this is actually unique and different and really cool. So much so that I know I'm under NDA, but like we're using everything he's doing inside of for our sales teams and stuff like that.
I know when you announced that yesterday in the mastermind, I'm like, I thought we had an NDA. I'm not really sure. Okay, there we go.
I'm bad at keeping secrets. You should all know that.
I know Matt's like, do not say anything. We're under an NDA. I'm like, lips are sealed. There's only like 3 or 4 people in the whole company that know we're doing this. And then Russell comes like, oh yeah, by the way, Jeremy, 7 levels about to start training our salespeople. I'm like, oh, well, sure. Okay. Yeah, there we go.
It was interesting too, like just so you guys have context, like we built a sales team, probably 15 years ago, 60 full-time sales guys.
Okay.
Like we were one of the first in this industry who were doing like sell something online, call them on the phone.
Okay.
And nowadays, a lot of people are doing that, teaching it, talking about it. But again, like I said, what you guys are doing is a different level, which is why I wanted to talk to you here. So, but to begin with, like I want to get context for you. So before you started doing sales training, you were doing sales, and I know basic your stats.
Hopefully I would have been in sales before I did sales training.
But were you good at sales?
Sure.
How good were you? Let me brag about yourself.
What would you like to know?
I saw stats somewhere. I don't know the exact number, but like your actual sales commissions in a year, which is ridiculous.
My best year, like commission only, because I only like negotiated commission only jobs. So like after my first year, because I started like selling door to door, like for what you would now known as Vivint in Salt Lake City, Utah. I started with Pinnacle Security, then moved to Apex, then went to Vivint. And then, so I was used to like straight commissions. So then I got into the B2B world after that. And then everybody would be like, we'll pay you like, this huge salary and like tiny commission. I'm like, no. I don't want any salary, but I want like this percentage of commission, And they're always like, that's great. And I'm like, yes, that's awesome. Really great. See, I'm confident in my sales process. But my biggest year as a salesperson that I made commission was about a little bit over 2.9 million straight commission. But there were several years in a row where I was making over like 2.4, 2.5 every year.
Yeah.
W2 or 1099.
It's crazy because I see like the top tier salespeople, and rightfully so, they're like bragging, I did $1 million in sales this year or whatever, which is great.
On a 7-figure closer. Yeah. I'm like, no, you're really not. But
Yeah. So
in my world, you're not. But yeah.
So how did you get? I mean, outside of negotiating commissions, but like, what were you doing differently? Do you think to?
Well, I probably had an unfair advantage. So my background in college was behavioral science and like social dynamics. So it's like really like, I don't want to give all the nerd stuff, but it's really the study of the brain and how human beings make decisions. Hey guys, Jeremy Miner here. Look, a lot of you leave comments wanting me to help you sell more. So the easiest way to get a hold of me, the quickest way, is to text me. So text me right now. It's 480-637-2944. So 480-637-2944. Listen, I started this company to help you learn how to close more deals, but do it the right way. Text me right now. Let's get back to the training video. So I started learning just how to work with human behavior, I would say. So I started taking like courses from like people like you would probably know, like Robert Cialdini and stuff like that. I started taking like advanced courses from just, weird stuff like psychologists and stuff that really didn't have anything to do with selling. I started taking I wanted to learn like advanced tonality and body language. So I would hire like acting trainers and stuff that would like train you how to use your facial expressions to like convey a different tone. And so that really probably set me apart than just like reading a traditional selling book, like you got to set goals, you got to work harder, like that stuff was really boring
Here's 6
to
different
me.
closes you can
Yeah,
try
like
tonight.
here's the 1,365 closing techniques. I'm just like, it's so transactional and so like non-human that it triggers sales resistance. So I learned how to like, the one thing that we really train salespeople in any industry is how do you get the prospect to let their guard down, like initially where they become open to what you're even talking about. So I started learning how to do that, and selling became pretty easy at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you coined the I don't know if you coined the phrase or the term, but NEPQ is your methodology, right?
Yeah, that is our methodology. So NEPQ stands for Neuro-Emotional Persuasion Questioning. So it's just my methodology that I developed over like about an 18-year sales career. I was in 4 different industries, 2 B2C, 2 B2B. Made 7 figures a year in commissions in all of those industries, multiple 7 figures in 3 of those industries per year. And that's why I always say, like, when people come back and they're like, oh, I'm a 7-figure closer. I wanted to go back to it because there was like, I'm a 7-figure closer. I closed $2 million in sales. I'm like, so you made $250,000. That's great. But like to be a 7-figure closer, you like, in my mind, like you have to be earning that much per year in commission. So
yeah.
So NEPQ comes from like my behavioral science background. I'm like a nerd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think in my world, there's two types of people who are probably listening to this. One is like the marketing nerds like me who are like, we market something and then we got a phone call in the back.
Yeah.
And the other are people who are doing sales or want to do sales. And so maybe let's start from the sales standpoint. So give us some basic, understand the principles of NEPQ, like how, some core things that someone could grab onto and like start applying right away.
I mean, the biggest thing with us, with NEPQ is like, you know, just one core principle that we would teach is to listen to what the prospect means, not just what they say. And that's a big difference that I think most salespeople just conceptually don't understand. Like I might ask you what we would call a commitment question, like to get you to commit to take the next step. I might say, you know, do you feel like this could be the answer for you? And you'll be like, yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, that tells me that you're uncertain, that you've got concerns. Whereas most salespeople be like, okay, and like he said yes, let's go, let's sign the agreement. But that to me, like I'm hearing your tone, and that tells me you're uncertain, you're concerned. I might just say, you seem a bit unsure. Like what's behind that? You know, I want them to open up. So that's just one concept that we would teach, like listening to what they mean, not just what they say.
Interesting. We had this wasn't a sales position, but one of our top customer support people had a conversation with them, and I was like, "How are you so good? Like you answer everyone loves you."
Yeah.
And they said the same thing. Like I don't respond what they ask me. I respond what they're actually saying.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know how to teach that or how to coach that because it's like, it's human dynamics. Like how do you actually know what they're saying? But that's why he was so great because he was able to look at that. And how do you teach that?
Well, it's something that everybody. I think there's this myth out there in the world of selling, and I think even marketing that people are born with these skills. You know, like I grew up on a freaking like cattle ranch in the middle of Missouri, outside of a town with less than 800 people in it. Like, you know, I wasn't born out of my mother's womb with like advanced questioning skills. You know, I wasn't born out of my mother's womb like advanced tonality. Like I wasn't born with advanced, objection prevention or handling skills. Like I just acquired those skills. Like I learned those skills. So if I can learn them, right, coming from a farm, that means anybody can acquire those skills. And in fact, we always hear like salespeople, like I'll do a keynote and like somebody will be like, oh, I've got the gift of the gab, like I'm so, I'm going to be so great. It says, I remember I'm training this pest control company over the East Coast here about 6 months ago. And I asked him some question and one guy randomly sat in the back and he's like, I'm brand new, I haven't started, but I got the gift of the gab. My mom said I could sell anything to anybody. And I'm like, actually the gift of the gab is probably going to hurt you because you ever heard of that saying, telling is not selling? Mm-hmm. The gift of the gab, actually, we have to train salespeople like actually how to like stop talking so much, like how to like slow down, like verbal pace the questions that you're talking about. Because a lot of times like salespeople ask questions, they're good, but they ask them so fast that the prospect has no time to internalize what they're actually asking. And so that's why they get like a knee-jerk, like surface level answer. Let's say you go into a car dealership, right? And the salesman comes up, hey, how's it going? How can I help you? Real quick. You're like, oh, just looking. Yeah. Right. It's a knee-jerk reaction. But if I slow down my tone, let me try to get the right tone. So say they walk in, I might say, hey, welcome into the dealership. Are you guys out just maybe kind of looking around today, or what's going on? I just slow down my tone. Are you out, looking around? Yeah, we're looking around. Do you know what you're maybe looking for? Like I'm kind of confused, right? So I draw them in. Perfect. So it's like how you shift your tone, like how you slow down, like verbal pace your questions out that really cause a prospect to actually engage with you.
Super interesting. So I I'm not a good one-on-one salesperson. I'm probably the worst in the
No,
world.
because you talk really fast.
Well, just
You're obviously the
I
best
get nervous,
marketer,
but I'm great on one-to-many, right? Like
Mhm.
and so it was
Yeah.
interesting because then when I was trying to learn how to do that, like, and again, people watch me and they're like, "You talk too fast, Russell," which I do, but
Yeah.
at the same time, like, I was studying when I was trying to learn how to speak from stage, like
Yeah.
really good presenters. And it wasn't just people selling; it was like
Yeah.
religious leaders, and it was other people. And that was a thing I noticed a lot was like their ability to use tonality, like speed and like loud and quiet. And so
Yeah, it's like
I started
fluctuating
practicing.
your tone.
I would practice that where I go, da, 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 and then I stop
Yeah.
and come back quieter. And
Yeah.
you see the audience, so they lean in, lean out.
Yeah.
It's like I say that from that standpoint.
Yeah. It's kind of what Tony Robbins does.
Yeah.
Like if you know, I mean, you know Tony, right? So if you watch Tony, like he'll get really fast and like really emotional, and then he like slows down, he'll like verbal pause. He's a master of that. You know, obviously that's not something he was born with. Somebody taught him that. Like President Obama, I'm not into politics, but like President Obama was really good when he was speaking, and that's why he engaged so many people. Is he would say something really, you know, prophetic or whatever his beliefs were, then he would kind of like verbal pause and like slow down his sentences and like let people internalize and think about it and like, you know, like I love him, you know. So that's those type of things like make the difference in influencing somebody or like somebody buying something from you compared to just, you know, asking scripted questions where you sound like a robot.
Yeah. So when you do work, people talking about, because obviously there is a direction you're taking somebody. Is there a script they're working off of or not? Or how does it typically
So I
work?
believe in like sales structures. Like, you know, you go back to like Hollywood, you see like the best actors and actresses and you watch their movies and everything they say is pretty much 100% scripted.
Mm-hmm.
But does it sound scripted? No, that's because they memorize their lines. So as a salesperson, you have to have a structure in your mind. You have to have questions you've got memorized. Now, that doesn't mean, because let's say if I'm, what we would ask, it's called an NEPQ situation question to find out what their situation is. And if they say something different, you know, that I'm not necessarily used to, I'm going to have to kind of change that next question I'm asking on the run, but I'm still in my framework, if that makes sense. So that's why in NEPQ, we have everything from connection questions to situation questions to problem awareness to solution awareness to consequence. And so that's why we've been able to go into any industry. We're in 161 industries now and be able to duplicate that process. And it doesn't matter if it's selling insurance to, coaching and consulting or, cars or cybersecurity. It doesn't really matter the industry. We're able to duplicate because we have all these salespeople on this framework where they know what they're looking for. And sometimes they have to relanguage the question based on the answer they're getting from the prospect. That makes sense. So do I believe in scripts? Yes. Do I believe in sounding scripted? No.
Yeah.
That's the
I've
difference.
seen, you get on the phone with salespeople, and the worst ones where you like throw a little detour in and they're like, and they don't know what to do, and they're like, come back.
And then they
like,
just
"Are
go
you
to the
paying any
next
attention?"
question. Yeah, they're like, ask you the same question again. You're like, they sound like a telemarketer, right?
Yeah.
And that's bad, but it's also, it's kind of like, it's both are bad. It's like the ones that just kind of wing it and don't really know where they're going. Like that's not going to work, and you can't sound scripted. So that's where your tone comes across. We train, like there's 5 tonalities that you really have to master. You have to master the curious tone. Like, walk me through it. What do you guys do to, generate new leads and clients now? Like if I'm selling leads to, say, a real estate agent, whatever, then there's the confused tone. Like, I'm not understanding. How did you mean when you said X, Y, Z? That's a confused tone, right? So why do I use a confused tone when I want them to clarify or probe? Because that would cause the prospect's brain to be like, and they don't even know what's going on, but it causes their brain to be like, oh, I didn't like really tell him, I didn't really explain that really well. I need to clarify it better. So that causes them to go deeper into that, like maybe problem they were talking about. So it gives them to relive their pain, right? So a confused tone would do that. If I didn't use a confused tone there, if I used a curious tone, like, oh, what happened when you said that? It's like, it doesn't do anything, right? It doesn't get them to internalize. Then there's like a challenging tone. So you're not going to use a challenging tone at the beginning of a conversation, but I might be halfway through and I might be saying, so what happens if you don't do anything about this and the situation gets worse? So that's a kind of a challenging tone where they kind of push back like, no, I need to do it now, right? But if I didn't use that tone, I wouldn't get that emotional reaction. And then there's like a concern tone. I might lean in and be like, what's really holding you back? Like tone that shows empathy, right? Because then that communicates. See, my tone is how the prospect interprets the intention behind every question I ask, right? So if they feel I'm concerned, they will typically trust me more and start to emotionally open up more. If they don't feel I'm concerned, they shut down. So, and then there's like a playful tone, let's say if somebody like comes to a call and they're late, I might say, well, what are we going to do with you, man? What's going on? Or I might, like if they're like, hey, how are you doing today? I'm like, oh, just hanging out, being the boring guy. What about you? Playful tone. So like all these type of tones influence the way the prospect's brain will react.
Do you try to hit all of them in every conversation, or is it based on the type of question, or just kind of depends?
Based on the type of question, right? So typically if I'm in, and it depends on the industry, right? Like, so if I'm, let's say, am I asking connection questions to like take the focus off me and put it on them, I'm going to use more of a curious tone. Like, oh, you saw the ad, like how long have you been following Jeremy for? Oh, you follow him on IG, just that's a connection question, So I'm going to use more of a curious tone there. Confused tone would probably be more used like if I'm probing, like if you tell me a problem, hold on, how long has that been going on for? See, that's a confused tone, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm probing, I'm probably using more confused tone. And it's something I actually learned I know it's crazy, but it's something I learned on the doorstep. So when I started selling door to door, there just wasn't much training, right? They give you a script. Here's 2 books by, some gurus who haven't sold anything for 40 years. They're like 90 years old. I'll be 90 one day too, so I'm making fun of myself. But they're like, hey, just go out there. It's going to be easy. And so I learned when I knock on the door and be like, hey, it's Jeremy. I'm with XYZ company. And the reason why we're out here, and they'd be like, slam, not interested, just really quick, because I would just go into like talking. And that's what every other salesperson that was knocking on the door or selling anything was saying every day. So I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do? And this is when I first started learning like what we would call pattern interrupts. I didn't call it that back then, but I'm like, how do I break this pattern where it triggers curiosity? Because I was learning about like, how do you trigger curiosity in the human mind? So I knock on the door and I started like changing even everything I wore. So I started wearing like khaki shorts, and everybody wears them now. It's like, I don't know if they got it from me, but khaki shorts, regular like t-shirt. I would wear like the old man New Balance shoes, the white old man shoes, the comfortable ones. I'd wear that. I put a tape measure on the side there, because you got to tape, measure where the alarm's going to go. And then I would wear like these weird, like just regular glasses. I'd wear like a $10 like Walmart watch. And then I would have like this, like those metal clipboards type of thing. Yeah. Like you're taking a survey, right? I wanted them to view me as like the survey guy or the meter reader. And then I bought like this construction vest. This is back. So I'd buy like I bought like a lime green one or like an orange one. I knock on the door, and so I'd be like looking around at the roof and everything, knocking on, and they come out and they're like, how can I help you? I'm like, yeah, are you guys the property owners here? And they're like, yeah, we're the property owners. What's going on? Like instantly pattern interrupt triggers curiosity. And so I learned just how to do that. And instead of knocking 100 doors to get a sale, I literally could knock on 5 and I would sell 3 out of 5. Mm-hmm. And everybody's like, this guy doesn't work hardly at all. And he makes 5 times more money than all of us. Like, what the hell's going on? So that's kind of how I started learning how to like trigger curiosity from the doors.
That reminds me of a Gary Halbert story. Gary Halbert was doing direct mail campaigns, and like he was doing, he'd go to the seminars and like, hey, this is how you do direct mail. You do this. And so he would like do the same thing. And then one day someone asked him a question, like if your family's life depended on somebody actually getting the mail, opening it, what would you do different? He's like, well, I wouldn't have body copy on the envelope. I'd make the stamp crooked. I'd use blue ink. And so he like went to exercise, and he's like, what if I did a campaign that way? And so he wrote this 1-page sales letter. It's famous. It's called the Coat of Arms sales letter, if you want to see it. Had a whole team of people who'd handwrite in blue ink, put a crooked letter on it, mailed it. I think that letter got mailed like 100 million times, like the most mailed direct sales letter of all time. Made him a multi-billion, whatever. But it was because of that thought of just like, everyone's doing this. How do I do the opposite?
Yeah.
And see what happens?
It's always the opposite, because like when like I'll do a reel on like cold calling. There's this one industry where we've like really dominate. I mean, it's the second largest industry trade now is real estate. So that's like commercial real estate agents, residential real estate, and then investors that call distressed properties. And so there's this huge company, you probably know them, but anyways, I can't say who they are. There's this huge company. Also underneath there's a huge company that we train, and they were like, we suck at cold calling. Like we have these lists. And so I wrote this cold calling script. We're actually getting a 71%. So when a prospect answers straight cold call, 71% now moved from them answering to booking a next step appointment, which is unheard of in cold calling. And so what I did is I'm like, okay, I've got to do a pattern interrupt. So I can't sound like all the other cold callers calling these properties like, hey, I'm with XYZ, real estate, and we like your house, and would you be willing to accept a cash offer 30 days, and they're like, yes or no, and then that's it. And like 99.9% say no. Right? Because they're just salesperson selling me something. So like, I'm like, okay, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to go print off the property tax records of these homes you're calling. They're like, what? And I'm like, no, just do it because you got to be authentic. I want to literally print off the property. You can get property tax records of all these homes you're calling. And so when you're calling them, I want you to hold them in your hand and I want you to like make noises with them. So like when you call, so it's like, it's right. It's like a total pattern. But like, because when you call, you want me to do it?
Yeah.
Oh, I have to do it. Okay. I've got to get the right tone.
You got to, yeah.
I need actually some papers. It'd actually be better, but.
We have paper back here.
Anybody got any papers? We got any papers? Oh yeah, perfect. Give me some papers here. Let's see if I get it. So when they call, let's see if I can remember this. They're like, this is Jenny. Yeah, Jenny, it's Jeremy Minor with XYZ company. I'm holding a copy of your property tax records of your home there in 55 Willow in Savannah. I was wondering if you could help me out for a moment. They're always like, yeah, sure. Because nobody's going to be like, not interested. When you say, I'm holding a copy of your property tax records of your home on 75 Willow Street, and see, I'm doing this. They're hearing that. They're like, yeah, what's going on? I'm like, well, and I'm not even sure if it would make sense for us to talk. So that's like a push them away type of thing. But I'm not even sure it would make sense for us to talk. I represent a group of buyers that they're actually looking to acquire. There's like 5 or maybe 6 different properties there by your Willow Wayne property. And they were having me go through your property tax records on that home. And they asked me to call you to see if you would be opposed to having a conversation about possibly even selling it. Should we be talking about that? 71%. Yeah, sure. What's going on? And it just triggers curiosity. So a couple things that I just did there when you're doing this. So I remember I did a reel on this one time. People are like, that would never work. I can't believe it. But then people in the company that we were training, they're like, dude, we're getting like 71% response rate. Like you guys just keep doing what you guys are doing. Like it's not going to work. But it's just an example of a pattern interrupt because nobody's going to hang up the phone because you're holding a copy of their property tax record. So it triggers curiosity. They're like, how'd you get my property tax record? Who are you guys again? What's going on? And that's all I have to do is I just have to trigger that pattern interrupt to get them to want to engage back and forth and then just build the gap. So that's just an example.
So cool.
Pattern interrupt.
So the last set of questions I'm kind of asking you now, because obviously from the sales standpoint, this is insane. Like all these are such cool things. But after you were a salesperson, you went and you built your company now where you're doing sales training, stuff like that. So a lot of the people who follow me are marketers or funnel builders or doing stuff like that. And so, yeah. But I remember for me, like I was an internet nerd. And so before we ever had people on the phones, like I was like, you sell things through email and through, like, that was how we did things. I remember the very first time, I actually had a friend working with me who'd worked at a call center and he was like, he was kind of shocked the other way. He's like, I can't believe people buying things through email. Like we had to do it on the phone.
Yeah.
And this is, man, almost probably 18 years ago.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Whole company's collapsing.
Yeah.
And I was like, how do we save this? And he was like, let's figure out a way. So I sent an email and I sold, I remember it was a free DVD. People would buy the DVD and then he'd call him on the phone. He's like, hey, you bought the DVD. And then he'd sell something. And we did that. And the very first month, we made a $5,500 offer. And the first week he sold it, we sold 11 of them. And I remember I was like, we made more money here. And he was like, anyway, so it was like this yin yang of like the funnels and online marketing and the phone sales. I just love you to talk about like, for people who are primarily just doing the internet stuff, like adding this piece on the back end, like how it can transform a business.
I think you have to have you have to know what to do. So there's so much out there. Like you said, like everything's been the same for 100 years. Like to me, communication goes all the way back to like the dawn of mankind. Like I'm like very philosophical, but like if you look at like, you study the Bible, like the war of heaven, right? Everybody's like, oh, there's a war of heaven. But like, do you really think about what that means? Like, was it a war of like tanks and like guns and like swords and like fist fights? No, it was a war of words. It was a war of influence. It was a war of persuasion. So to me, like selling, like when you understand what selling means, it's not like adversarial. Like it's not you against the prospect trying to win them over so you can make money. Like that's what average salespeople do. Like if you want to be like top 1% salesperson, or if you want to, a company that scales, you have to view that selling is collaborative. It's like you working with the prospect to help them find and solve problems that maybe they didn't know they had. Like you heard me in there talking about like, well, how are you seeding a problem in their mind? Like, because a lot of people just don't know what they don't know. So I think a lot of marketers out there, I think you're so great at seeding problems. I think if you just took what you're doing in marketing and actually applied it to sales, because you're good, all these marketers are so great at seeding problems in their copy that the prospect starts to internalize and maybe didn't think they know they had. But then when their salespeople get on there, it's like they ask 2 questions. what's your biggest problem? What are you looking for in a solution? And then the prospect tells them a problem. They're like, oh, well, let me tell you, we solved that. And they go right into their pitch, right? It's like exactly opposite of what you're doing in your marketing. So like once you learn how to, ask the right questions, the right time, the right tone, and you help the prospect find problems in their mind that they didn't know they had, they start to view you more as like the expert, right? Like the authority. That's how they view you in marketing, right? So if you transfer that into sales, which that's what we do, human behavior, it's actually really easy to sell because what I always say here is like, when we train salespeople or companies, we're like, who has the problem? You or the prospect? And they're like, well, the prospect has a problem. I'm like, yeah, the prospect has the problems. Who has a solution to solve those problems? You do. So if the prospect have problems and your solution solves those, then what's the missing link? Why are they not buying from you? Well, the missing link is you. It's what you're saying. It's what you're not asking. It's how you don't understand how to use your tone. Because the prospect has the problems, your solution solves those. It should be a pretty good match, right? And so what we train salespeople is like, how do you get since the prospect has the problems, how do you get them to do all the work? See, I don't have the problem, right? The prospect has the problem. So how do I get the prospect to do all the work? How do I get the prospect to sell themselves? How do I get the prospect to overcome their own concerns? And how do I get the prospect to pull me in? Whereas traditional sales training would be like, you got to do the work. You got to do the convincing. You got to do the persuading. You got to overcome their own objections. Like you got to push and pressure. And that's only going to get you to like a certain level. And I think that's where a lot of marketers just, they don't know what they don't know because they're so great at marketing that what they're doing in marketing, if they just learned how to put that into their sales team, they would actually blow up times 10. And that's what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool.
Bunch of boring stuff,
Yeah. Tons of money. Well, I appreciate you coming out and sharing the stuff. Like I said, I talk about marketing with my people, but never talk about sales. And like I said, I'm super impressed with just how unique your angle and direction is on it. So
I think, like I said, it's like so many marketers. Like I see your stuff and everybody's stuff is so good at seeding doubt in the prospect's mind through just things they say and they ask and framing and looping. And I'm like, they just don't understand how to do it on the sales side. And they're just so used to like, our salespeople are going to buy this book from the sales trainer that hasn't sold anything.
Read this book and figure it out.
It's like, like boiler room selling type of techniques. And it's such a disconnect from the prospect going from their copy, which seeds that and like sets them up. And then they get on a sales call and it's like, they're trying to like, push and pressure them. Now that doesn't mean you get to the end of a call or a Zoom appointment or in person. You're like, well, let me know if you're interested, email me back. Like that's not going to do anything as well. You have to like, we always say you have to build a gap, right? It's like you have to help the prospect understand what their real situation is because, as you know, when you do copy, most prospects don't really understand what the real situation is, do they, right? It's your job as a marketer or salespeople to help them understand. As a salesperson, you can't tell them what their real situation is. You can't tell them their problems because you're biased. That's just going to go in one ear out the other. Your questions have to get them to start to internalize and tell themselves what their problems are. And what that does is it starts to build a gap. So we call this like their current state or current situation, building a gap to what we would call their objective state. Like what does their future look like once the newfound problems are solved? How do you build a gap? Like I said, you can't tell them what the problems are. Your questioning, your tone allows them to internalize and to tell themselves their problems. And what that does, like you guys do in marketing, is it builds massive urgency for them to want to change. What's the biggest emotional driver in a human being that causes them to want to change? Pain or the fear of future pain. So if you can help the prospect relive their pain or at least have the fear of future pain, like what are the consequences if they don't do anything, then they don't feel like they need to change. And if they don't feel like they need to change, there's no urgency for them to do something. So, that's the biggest thing. And I always say selling is about change. There's nothing else. But how do you get a human being to change? Because human beings don't like change. Is you have to help them overcome that fear of change to actually get what they want. Yeah.
So good.
Crazy stuff. Yeah. So you started following me 2 years ago, huh? We weren't even that big we were decent sized 2 years ago, but
from the very first time you came in your circle, I was like, hey.
Oh, really?
I remember because you kept coming through NEPQ, I kept seeing that over and over and over again. And first I was like, oh, he's rapping something different. But then like I kept seeing it so consistently. And when people are consistent, I'm always like, they're doing something or they're not going to be this consistent. And I started looking deeper and I was like, oh, this is actually different. This is really cool.
Yeah. I like I said, behavioral science, social dynamics, like there's not much out there on that. So we have a little bit of an advantage, but there you go.
Well, it's interesting as I've been, we started down this journey with you guys, start working with you, just finding other people I knew were like, oh yeah, they're training our whole team, and they're doing like this. Like it was really fascinating to see
You're like, they're everywhere. Yeah.
how many people's hands you're in, applying the stuff and just making the sales world better from the inside out, which is amazing.
It's really fun for me. Like it's I really like it. Like, you know,
it's gonna be fun to see. Like
we had an offer to like, you know, for a company to buy us, and we're like, yeah, but if we,
so much fun.
I mean, it's just money. Like I actually really better have fun, you know?
Yeah. I think for me, like when I started teaching funnels to people, my favorite part was seeing all these other industries apply it, like that I'd never been in, but I was like, I knew they still work.
Yeah.
Probably similar for you. It's like, I can't believe this works here and here. Like,
yeah, because I was only in 4 industries. I was in 2 B2B. I mean, so I was in like financial debt relief services, B2B. I was in network marketing, made a lot of money there, B2C, you know, door-to-door, B2C. And then I sold like financial events, stuff, B2B and B2C. So I was only in 4 industries. So when I started 7th level, like late 2018, which was just me and my assistant, I actually won that 2 combo awards. You want me to tell you a funny thing?
Yeah.
So that year that I started, it was me and my assistant for my job. And I did 3 webinars, made like 1.3 million in sales, and I spent 1.8. So I'm like, I lost 500 grand my first year. I'm like, oh, it's not good to keep losing 500,000 every year. I'm like, how many more years can I keep losing $500,000 a year and like then have to unretire and go back to work? So I'm like, you know, then I started like figuring out like, oh, I need a team and I need to learn how to do some stuff, you know, because you can have, like you said, you can have the best product or service in the world, but if you don't have a team around you to market it and to, you know, to like a great CEO to run the business and those type of things, you're going to struggle, you know. So it takes a while to, it takes a while to grow. It's frustrating, right? Because you have a successful career, you're like, oh, I'm just going to go in here and like in a month we'll be up here, and it's like, oh, well, you have to build like an infrastructure and like all this stuff, you know, that I didn't know about, you know.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate you.
Well, thanks for having me on.
More about NEPQ and you and everywhere's the best place for them to go?
Let's have them go. We'll give them one of our free Facebook groups. Let's have them go to salesrevolution.pro. We got about 100,000 people in there, salespeople, all different industries, and they can go there. You know, we'll give them little nibbles, and we go live in there 2 or 3 times a week, 2 to 3 times a week, different trainings and interviews with clients from all industries. It's kind of fun. And if they want to purchase one of our books, they can go to barnesandnoble.com. We have a Barnes & Noble bestseller and Wall Street Journal bestseller, Amazon bestseller. Don't buy it from Amazon. We have a deal with Barnes & Noble. I will get upset. And type in The New Model of Selling, Jeremy Miner or Jerry Acuff, New Model of Selling, barnesandnoble.com. It's a good book. Yeah.
Bezos has got enough money. Don't go to Amazon.
I know. Don't go to Amazon. Please. If you go to, you know, I think it's like 50 cents more from Barnes & Noble. So, you know, we have a deal with them. The more books they sell online, the more shelves in their bookstores over the United States they put. So, no Amazon. I like Amazon. I'm sure we have book sales there, but there you go.
That's awesome.
Thanks for having me on,
Appreciate you. And hope you guys enjoyed this interview.
I've been enjoying like just doing the just walk around of your office and seeing like all the books you collect and all that stuff. Like I'm an avid historian. I'm like a geek. I like watching like the History Channel and like documentaries all night long. Saturday night, I'm like, oh man, this is a great documentary on like the German collapse of the World War II, like in Bulgaria, you know, like people are like, why do you watch that weird stuff? I'm like, I don't know. I just really like history.
Sounds so cool.
So I love seeing all your stuff, you know, especially with the LDS Church and stuff. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, good stuff.
Very cool.